Joining us right now, Arthur Brooks of American Enterprise Institute. Of course, he's the best-selling author of The Road to Freedom. He's got a brand new book, The Conservative Heart, How to Build a Fairer, Happier, and More Prosperous America. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Brooks.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Great. You know, I think it was Winston Churchill who's credited with that statement that if you're a young person and you're not a liberal, you don't have a brain. And if you're an older person... No, wait. Hey, let me try it. Let me turn it around. If you're although I would stick with that. If you're a young person and you're not a liberal, you don't have a heart. And if you're an older person and you're not a conservative, you don't have a brain. There's this idea that being a conservative means that you don't have a heart. Is that what your book addresses here, the conservative heart?
Yeah, you know, I grew up in a liberal family in Seattle, imagine, where, there are like 8 Republicans out there. And, growing up, I heard that conservatives hate poor people, conservatives are hard-hearted. They might be good with money, but they're not so good with matters of the heart. And as I grew up, one of the things that I found, particularly when I studied economics in my 20s, I didn't go to college until I was 30, which was kind of good, no brainwashing there. And when I was studying economics, I found that what we think of as conservative ideas actually have pulled more people out of poverty than any other ideas in the history of mankind. Literally, globalization and free enterprise have pulled 2 billion people out of poverty since I was a child. The first time that's ever happened, I thought, well, there's something wrong. People don't understand this. I wrote this book so that conservatives who know that they have a heart, they know that they care about the poor, will never again lose an argument about whether or not they care about poverty.
Well, I gotta say that sounds great. Although it also sounds dangerously like George W. Bush's slogan in 2000 about being a compassionate conservative. A lot of people who were conservatives at the time says, "Wait a minute, why do you have to distinguish yourself as a compassionate conservative? All conservatives are compassionate. We just don't look to the government to express and deal out that compassion." Are you worried that you're going to be sort of stuck into that thing? It's like the conservative heart. Well, all conservatives have a heart.
That's exactly the point of the book. See, the problem with compassionate conservatism back in the 2000s was that you had to append something to the heart. You had to say, well, look, I'm a conservative, but I'm compassionate.
Yeah.
No, the truth of the matter is that conservative policies, in truth, all of us should have a compassionate heart. Each one of us is, in my view, we're commanded to look out for the least of these, our brothers and sisters. But the key thing to remember is that conservative economic policies and national security policies, they save people's lives. They lift people up into dignity. They talk about work. That's inherently compassionate. You don't need a qualifier. Being a conservative is a compassionate thing to do. Then you got to get your heart right and be able to explain it to others so we stop losing arguments.
So, but clearly you're writing this is Del. Clearly you're writing this now because the conservative has a brand problem in your mind.
Sure.
If you have to say, hey, the Tin Man didn't have a heart, the Cowardly Lion had a heart, but no courage. You have to make people know that you have a heart.
Yeah.
And that these values are there. And I wonder where did that start and why?
So the brand problem came around. It really started when conservatives figured out that they had a lock on good economic, hard-headed, materialistic economic policies. So you go back to the 1980s during the Reagan years, they just would sort of explain economics to people and let the pieces fall into place. Well, that just doesn't work anymore. The truth of the matter is, here's the central irony of our time. Liberal values, liberal policies are very materialistic. They talk about governments lifting people out of poverty. They talk about government programs maintaining people. People become dependent. It's a very materialistic understanding of the world, but they wrap themselves in moral language about fairness and compassion. We, on the other hand, those of us who have conservative views, we're inherently moralists. We believe that every single person has the autonomous dignity to be able to work and create value, that everybody should have equal opportunity, yet we wrap our values in materialistic language about GDP and taxes. That's a huge mistake. We need to talk about what we really care about, which is lifting people in need out of poverty and giving everybody equal opportunity and being warriors for that. Well, then we don't have a brand problem anymore if we do it.
Arthur Brooks, this is more than just leadership, and I do want to ask you about the potential GOP leaders emerging from this race that might be able to articulate this that you put in your book. But first, let me talk about the rank and file, people who are just listening, people who believe in their hearts with these ideas and are conservative in their heart. They're talking at the coffee machine or at the water cooler in their offices. What kind of examples, what kind of things should they be saying rhetorically to their liberal counterpart in the office to actually explain, yes, we're all about the heart.
Okay, so I have a chapter at the end of this book, the last chapter of the book, called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Conservatives, and it's a debate manual. So the guarantee is, anybody who's listening to us today who reads the last chapter of the book, my guarantee is you're not going to lose your next debate around the water cooler when somebody says you don't care about people. Here's the number one thing to keep in mind, guys. Always fight for people, never fight against things. Conservatives are in this terrible rut of fighting against everything. We're against taxes, we're against spending, we're against government, we're against bureaucracy. I know that. I mean, I got a PhD in that product line. I got it, right? But the trouble is that the majority that's really setting the way forward for the country isn't fighting against things, it's fighting for people. Always talk about who you're fighting for. Get the face of these people. This book is full of dozens of examples of people who pulled themselves out of poverty using some of the ideas that we really care about. People who were poor, now they're working, now they're with their families. And it's all because faith, family, community, and work, especially work, has given their lives meaning. Fight for people, not against things.
Which of the 2016 candidates, and there are now a billion of them,
yes,
on the Republican side, who do you think would articulate this the best to get through the primary, the Republican primaries are not going to be geared towards, this compassionate heart conservative, but then be able to spin this more to the center with these issues to appeal more to the broad middle of the country that you're just talking about right now?
Well, the good news is that it's sort of good news that we have 475 candidates or something like that. The really good news is that the broader swath of these guys, men and women actually at this point, are talking about people who are poor, are talking about people in need for the first time. 2012, it wasn't coming up. Remember, they were talking about poor people like moochers and takers. It was a huge problem. It was a sinkhole politically for Republicans. This time, they're competing with each other to say who's got better poverty policy. So you hear Jeb with great ideas and Marco Rubio with great ideas. You hear Scott Walker, who's starting to talk more and more about it. Rick Perry gave a visionary speech the other day. Ted Cruz doesn't talk about fighting against Obamacare. He talks about fighting for the people who are being hurt by Obamacare increasingly, which is a really good technique. There's a threat, of course. You can always get into the pessimistic rut that we see right now. I mean, sort of the Trump boomlet is a little troublesome, but I think that the Republican candidates are going to get back on track, and I think that this time you're going to see a new look. I'm pretty optimistic, actually.
Sounds like it. And, listen, if you have a book called The Conservative Heart, How to Build a Fairer, Happier, and More Prosperous America, you got to be a positive, optimistic guy. And that's what Ronald Reagan was all about, too. Arthur Brooks, so great to have you. It sounds great.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Have a great day.